the moment you stop reacting, people don't calm down. They don't relax. They don't suddenly become more understanding. They lose control, and most people never realize why. Because everything you've been taught tells you to do the opposite. To respond, to explain, to defend yourself, to make sure you're understood. You've been conditioned to believe that clarity comes from speaking more, that control comes from saying the right thing. But in reality, the more you react, the more you give away. Because every reaction is information, and information creates leverage. When someone sees how you react under pressure, they learn something about you. What triggers you? What affects you? What makes you move? And once someone understands that, they don't need to overpower you, they just need to press the right button. That's why silence feels so uncomfortable, because silence removes the buttons. It disconnects the system. Now there's nothing to press, nothing to trigger, nothing to control. And when that happens, the dynamic changes completely, because now the other person has no clear signal, no emotional feedback, no confirmation that what they said affected you. And that creates something most people can't handle. Uncertainty, and uncertainty creates pressure. Not for you, for them. Because humans are wired to seek feedback. We need to know where we stand. We need signals, we need responses. So when you remove your reaction, you interrupt that system. Now they're left guessing. Did that affect them? Why aren't they responding? Did I go too far? Do they not care? And the more they guess, the more they reveal. Not through what they say, but through how they behave. Because when people feel uncertain, they compensate. They talk more, they push harder, they repeat themselves. They try to provoke you. Not because they're confident, but because they're uncomfortable. And this is where most people fail. Because when that pressure builds, they feel it too. They feel the silence, they feel the tension, and their instinct is to break it, to explain, to respond, to release the discomfort. But the moment you do that, you give the control back. Everything resets, and you go right back into the same pattern. Reaction, response, explanation, loss of control. Over and over again. But if you don't break, if you stay grounded in that silence, something different happens. The pressure doesn't disappear, it shifts. Now it's not on you anymore, it's on them. And most people are not prepared to carry that, because they rely on your reaction to stabilize the interaction. Without it, they lose their reference point. And that's when you start to see who they really are. Because without your reactions guiding the situation, people fall back on their default behavior. Some become aggressive, trying to force a response. Some become nervous, trying to fix something. Some become distant because they don't know how to operate. And all of this tells you more about them than anything they could say. But you only see it if you don't interrupt it, if you don't jump in and reset the dynamic. And that takes discipline. Because silence is not passive. It's active restraint. It's choosing not to act when every part of you wants to. And that's where real control begins. Not in controlling others, but in controlling yourself. Because the truth is, no one can control you without your reaction. They can try, they can push, they can provoke. But without your response, they have nothing to work with. And that's where your power comes from. Not from dominating, but from not being controlled. And this becomes very clear in moments of tension, in arguments, in disagreements, in situations where emotions are high. Most people react instantly. They defend themselves. They raise their voice. They try to prove their point. But the more they do that, the more they lose control, because now the interaction is driven by emotion, not clarity, not intention, just reaction. And reaction is predictable. And predictable behavior is easy to manipulate. So if someone knows you'll react when pushed, they just need to push you. But if you don't react, if you stay calm, if you remain still, you interrupt that entire process. Now, they can't predict you. They can't control the direction. They can't rely on your response. And that forces them to adjust, to think, to become more aware of their behavior. Because now, they're not dealing with someone who reacts automatically. They're dealing with someone who chooses, and choice is what creates power. Because when you choose your response, instead of reacting automatically, you create space. And in that space, you gain awareness. You see things more clearly. You notice patterns. You understand intentions. Because you're not caught in the emotion. You're observing it. And observation gives you something most people don't have. Clarity. And clarity gives you control. Not control over others, but control over how you engage, how you respond, how you move. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not trying to win interactions. You're choosing how to participate. And sometimes, the most powerful choice is to not participate at all, to stay silent, to observe, to let things unfold without interference. And that's not weakness, that's control. But here's where it gets deeper. Because silence is not just external, it's internal. You can stay quiet on the outside and still be reacting on the inside, still arguing in your head, still feeling the need to respond. Real silence starts internally. It's the absence of urgency, the absence of emotional pressure, the absence of the need to prove something, and that's what makes it powerful. Because when you don't feel the need to react, you naturally don't. There's no force, no resistance, just stillness. And that stillness changes your presence. People can feel it, even if they don't understand it. There's a difference between being quiet and being calm. From not being moved by every situation, from not needing to respond to everything, from not feeling responsible for how others perceive you. And that last part is where most struggle. Because a lot of reactions come from the need to be understood, to be seen correctly, to not be misunderstood. So you explain, you defend, you clarify. But the more you do that, the more you give away. Because you're operating from a position of needing validation. But when you remove that need, when you become comfortable being misunderstood, something shifts. Now you're acting from your own clarity. And that's where independence begins. Emotional independence. The ability to exist in a situation without being controlled by it. And that changes how people interact with you. Because now, they don't get automatic access to your reactions. They don't get responses on demand, and that forces them to adjust. To respect your space, to approach you differently, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped giving it away. And that's how respect actually works. It's not something you force. It's something that emerges when you stop overextending yourself. When you stop reacting, you stop overextending yourself, and that's when something unexpected starts to happen. People begin to treat you differently, because when you no longer react to everything, people can't pull you into unnecessary conversations. They can't provoke you as easily. They can't rely on your emotional responses, and that forces them to adjust. But to really understand this, you have to see how it plays out in real situations. Take a simple example, an argument. Someone says something that challenges you. Maybe they misunderstand you. Maybe they accuse you of something, and your immediate instinct is to respond, to correct them, to defend yourself, because you want to be understood. But the moment you do that, you step into their frame. Now you're reacting. Now you're emotionally involved and easier to control. But imagine a different response, or rather, no response. You hear what they say, but you don't react immediately. You let the silence exist. At first, it feels uncomfortable. But then they start filling the space. They explain more. They repeat themselves, because now they're unsure. And in that uncertainty, they start revealing more than they intended. Not because you forced them, but because you didn't interrupt them. And when you do respond, if you choose to, you're not reacting emotionally. You're responding intentionally. And that changes everything, because now your words carry weight. They're precise, and precision is far more powerful than reaction. This is the shift from urgency to patience.